We started to discuss the use of gears in our first video on the car controls, and we showed you how to hold the gear lever to select each of the gears. However, as well as knowing how to change the gear, we also need to know when to change gear and which gear to select. We previously looked at the layout of the gears, and this should be memorized so that you never have to look at the gear lever when changing gear. You should never have to force the gear lever either. In my experience, this always leads to a wrong gear change. We should aim to use the gears to match the engine speed and load to the speed of the vehicle. The load is simply how much weight the car is being asked to pull, and so if you have 3 or 4 passengers plus a lot of luggage, then the load on the engine will be much greater. The engine speed and load will also vary depending on whether the vehicle is being driven on a level road, uphill or downhill. Generally, as the speed of the vehicle increases, we should change up to the next appropriate gear. When you are starting to learn to drive, your instructor will certainly help you with when to change gear and which gear to select, but listening to the engine will help you to understand when to change gear. So to change up a gear, place your left hand on the gear lever and at the same time ease off the pressure on the accelerator pedal, and then depress the clutch fully and select the next appropriate gear. Then allow the clutch pedal up smoothly and at the same time start to apply a little pressure onto the accelerator. Put your left hand back onto the steering wheel as soon as the gear change has been completed. Releasing the accelerator when changing up allows the engine speed to drop slightly to match the higher gear and give you a smooth gear change. You will need to change to a lower gear if you have slowed down and the gear you are in doesn't provide enough power for driving the vehicle at the lower speed. Or if you are going uphill into higher gear, then the engine may labour and you will need a lower gear to give sufficient power to continue to climb the hill. You may also need to change to a lower gear when on a long downhill gradient, as the lower gear will increase the effect of engine braking, which will assist you in controlling the vehicle on the downhill slope. Generally, use the foot brake to slow the car before you change down to a lower gear so that the speed of the vehicle will match the speed of the engine. So to change down on a level or downhill road, place your left hand on the gear lever, start to apply a little pressure to the foot brake and push the clutch pedal right down, and then select the most appropriate gear for the lower speed. Then release the clutch pedal and either continue braking until you are at an appropriate speed or return to the accelerator to continue to build speed. Your left hand should be returned to the steering wheel as soon as you have made the gear change. If we need to change down whilst going uphill, then you may need to keep a little pressure on the accelerator pedal whilst changing gear so that the engine speed is kept a bit higher so that it will match the engine speed required for the lower gear. How much pressure is needed on either the accelerator or the foot brake will depend on the road conditions and the speed of your vehicle at the time that the clutch pedal is released. Again, your instructor will help you with this in the early days, but listening to the engine will again help your judgment, and with practice you will soon be able to change gear without your instructor telling you. In order to be in the correct gear for any particular road or traffic conditions, you will need to anticipate well ahead and assess the situation early. Whenever you approach a hazard that is going to cause you to slow down, then you must always consider whether a lower gear will then be appropriate. For best control in hazardous situations, try to change down before the engine starts to labour. Sometimes when changing down you will miss out gears. We call this block gear changing. For instance, if we are approaching a left turn and we are travelling at say 30 miles an hour in fourth gear, then you would slow the car with the foot brake and change to second gear so that you can take the turn at about 10 to 15 miles an hour. In some situations you may miss out a gear when changing up, but make sure that this is not at the expense of over-accelerating in one of the lower gears. Some common problems when changing gear are coasting or slipping the clutch. Coasting will occur when the vehicle is moving but the clutch pedal is being held down or neutral has been selected. Either of these is wrong and can reduce your control of the vehicle, and on a flat or downhill road will almost certainly cause the car to go faster than you want it to. As a consequence, you may end up having to use more brake than is actually necessary for the manoeuvre, or if you're in neutral, then you may find it difficult to get into an appropriate gear to continue the journey. Slipping the clutch is holding the clutch pedal slightly down so that it is not fully engaged. This is normally done to compensate for being in too high a gear at too low a speed, and is very bad driving practice. This incorrect use of the clutch can also result in the clutch wearing excessively and, at the end of the day, costing you a lot of money. As you gain experience, you will be able to judge the correct gear for individual circumstances, and I find it useful to remind my clients that the gears are to go and the brakes are to slow. If we remember just that simple rule, it will help us in using the gear lever correctly.